Hello, and this is a book review. Interesting ideas I found in this book or course, Brain Myths Exploded. So let's see what we have. First one is the brain is spending a lot of energy on random firing of neurons which has no meaning. So a lot of energy is being spent for useless, you can say, firing of neurons, which does not play any specific role. Next one is the idea that mental illness is narrowed down only to chemicals is a myth. There is many more variables that goes into account. So some people think that mental illness is just chemicals, but as she says in the course, there is many other variables that we should take into consideration. Next one is the idea that the left and the right hemispheres are separately responsible for different functions is wrong. The brain is much more plastic and flexible than this. So the hemispheres they do many different jobs. So it's not like this, the right hemisphere is doing this and the left hemisphere is doing this and only this. So there is more of cooperation and plasticity that goes in there. Next one is sexual selection means that peacock tail does not help for survival, but the females encouraged it. Sexual selection plays a role in genes differences between male and female. So that's what sexual selection is. So peacock tail does not help with anything. It doesn't help survival, but females select it. That's sexual selection. And then we have sexual selection plays a role in genes. And this is how different genes of male and female are being developed. Next, brain size does not transition to higher intelligence. There is this myth of brain size. Bigger brain size means higher intelligence, and that's a myth. Next one is there is no much difference between male to female brain except of the amygdala, the part that process emotions. Mainly, there is no much big differences, especially physically. Physically, the biggest difference is in the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotion. Next is, it's not that men don't have emotions, it's just implicit rather than explicit for women. So that's one of the differences we spoke here, the amygdala. So the differences between man and woman is men have implicit emotions and for women is explicit. Next is long-term memory is whatever you remember more than just working memory. Usually I thought longer memory is only for long-term thing, but the term or the definition of long-term memory is whatever is not working memory, it's not, you don't need to remember for the task at hand. Next, memories that are being retrieved many times are being formed to be independent of any intervention. So if we rethink and remember different memories, it becomes independent of intervention, and it's much harder to change that memory afterwards. Next, if you do not pay attention for details, the hippocampus will not take note of those and therefore will not be remembered. So if you don't pay attention, if things are just like you go with the flow, for example, the hippocampus will not take note, which means you do not remember those events. So you need to pay attention in order to remember that. Next, what we use our time for will restructure the brain accordingly. It's not that we use only 10% of the brain, we just use it for different activities. So there is this idea of when we use 10% of our brain, This is not correct. We just use it for different functions. And the way we will use our brain, it will restructure our brain. So the brain of a pianist looks very different from the brain of a sport. Someone plays soccer, for example. But it's been formed and can be formed differently. Next, you might feel as we can perceive anything at our view, but the truth is that you can only read where you focus on, what you focus on, while the rest is very blurry. So we think we see HD, full HD everywhere we have all of our vision field, but this is not true. And the truth is that you can only see high definition. You can say HD only where you focus on. The rest is very blurry. Next, in some cases, the brain creates feeling, even when such a one does not exist. So I do not remember exactly what it means, but sometimes the brain will create some feelings, even though it doesn't necessarily correlate with anything. I'm not sure exactly. Next one. When we find a pattern, we get a dopamine dose, which explain confirmation matters. So I like this one. We are a pattern machine in some way, and we get a dopamine dose when we find a pattern. And that's one of the reasons we have confirmation bias. It's like it's combating dopamine in other ways if you want to combat confirmation bias. Next one is the idea that we have only 5 senses is a myth. We have much more than 5 senses. We have other than 5. So 5 is like maybe very general ones. They have much more. Next. There is no evidence that fish oil's specific vitamins and antioxidants are making you smarter. So there is supposed to all kinds of supplements that's supposed to make you smarter, but the evidence, there is no evidence for that smartness that can be accumulated or achieved by this. Next one is sugar does not seem to make children more hyperactive. Could be psychologically or socially reactional. So sugar is not the cause of hyperactiveness, if that's a word. It could be just like psychologically reaction, or maybe social situation that maybe it's like when they're with many kids and they get sugar, you think it's because of the sugar, but because of the kids, etc. Interesting. Next one is games that's supposed to help the brain to function better does not seem to have any support. So some games supposed to help your brain and that's supposed to like make you smarter. Again, there is no evidence for any differences. Next one is we are less likely to wake up if it's cold unless it's very cold during the night because cold receptors are less active during the sleep. Usually if it's hot, we will wake. It's much easier for us to awake. But if it's cold, could be a little cold, we're not gonna get awakened. Because the cold receptors are not as active. Next, the main use of sleeping is to clear and organize the brain. That's what it's clearing and organizing the brain, and that's the main reason of sleeping. Having 3 models of a product when one of them is very expensive makes the middle one more desirable. So that's one of a selling technique. Having 3 items, so 3 microwaves. One of them is cheap, one of them is expensive, and there is a middle one. And that's one of the way to make the middle one more desirable, because no one want to get the cheaper one. No one, like the expensive one is very expensive, and you're more likely to go for the middle one. Rather, if you have only the 2, the first and the second one, you will go on to the first. You're more likely to learn the first. Interesting. Next, consciousness integration means that we cannot disassociate the red color from it's a car. That's what it means, consciousness integration. So if you said it's a red car, you cannot disassociate the red color from it's a red car. It's the same. It's coming as a one unit. Next, putting the red dot on a monkey can check his self-recognition. So that's one of the ways they check for self-recognition in monkeys. They put a red dot on him, and they see if he check himself, and if he understanding that the red dot is on him. I find it interesting, and it's a good solution of how to check that. Like it. Next one is, when multitasking, the brain will pick the easy task. That's one of the problems of multitasking, because the brain will default for the easy task rather than the hard one, and then you don't achieve or don't have any progress in the harder task. Next, multitasking is similar to addiction. The more we do it, the more we want it. So it's some kind of addiction to multitask, and we want it more and more. So it's one of the reasons we like doing that. Next, when learning to deliver a speech, it's better to space the remembering. In memorizing things, it's better to have spacing. So it's not good to like go through your speech over and over and over again. It's better to space it out. Next, dream help the brain take a traumatic event and strap it from his emotions. Additionally, it's cleaning the brain of useless information. That's what dreams help, and that's one of the reasons sleeping is very important. It's really interesting. It's strapping strapping the emotions from the event, so you won't be as hard and traumatic for the person. And also cleaning useless information, which we spoke a little bit before. Next, there are two ways that the brain learns probabilities, either by explicit or implicit, meaning conscious or unconscious. There is two ways we can learn probabilities. You can also consciously learn that, or subconsciously. So our brain doing that a little bit, even though it's not great, but it can subconsciously understand some probabilities. Or explicitly, like subconsciously learning about how probabilities work. Next, kids have a small attention span, but a more accurate description will be they have infinite attention because they pay attention to everything. People say, oh, they just go from task to task and they don't have attention. But the truth is that they have a lot of attention. Their attention span is infinite because they just fully pay attention to everything, and there is too many things that catch their attention. Next, mirror neurons enable us to understand what the other person thinks. Alternatively, it also helps us to imitate others' actions. And that's what mirror neurons do. We can understand what the other person might think, so we can put ourselves in his shoes in some way. And it also helps us to imitate, so we can understand what others do and do the same. So we are very good imitators in general. I like this one. Interesting and important information. Next, Plato thought that writing will make people dumb, just as they say about computers. I find it really funny and ironic a little bit. So this is what they said, and Plato, should have been a smart man, said the same thing about writing. It will make people dumb, and I think we see otherwise. And they said the same thing about computers that make people dumb, and maybe it would be the same. We don't know, but it's just funny. Next, people have problem when they not in control of the situation, but oftentimes they fail or to fall into something, like falling into a novel, which smartphones does not help with. So that's one of the problems smartphone has, that people have problem of falling into things because you have shorter attention span, if you might say. People are falling into something, but so they don't want to fall into something because they want to feel in control, but they also like when they lose that control. But smartphone does not help us doing so because it's harder to distract ourselves. We don't want to lose it, and we are using our smartphone for that. Next, documentation of kids might influence their memory. Will they remember the memory or the video? It's an interesting question. So kids these days have a lot of videos and pictures, many, depends of course what family, but many doing that. And the question, how will they affect it? So will they remember the memory or the video? And it's an interesting question to end with. That is it here. In general, I like this course, not a book. I'm not sure you can call it a book, but interesting. Probably 3 to 4, and that's my go-to. More towards 4 though, because there's like some interesting facts and ideas. Other ones are known, but it's being portrayed in a very nice and elegant way. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.